He doesn't trust the state to protect him anymore. Chiwenga's private security in Uganda says everything. Praise Babu, welcome back. Pamzinda Weban. All right, 6 days to May 18th. And today, it's 8 days. And today we have a story that is not about a speech or a leaked audio or a petition to parliament. It is about a decision, a quite deliberate, deeply significant decision that Chiwenga made before boarding his plane to Kampala this week. He arranged his own security. Not the state security, Zimbabwe, not the CIO detail that is standard protocol for every senior government official traveling internationally. Not the presidential guard unit that is constitutionally mandated to protect the vice president of Zimbabwe, his own security, hand-picked, personally vetted, military special forces veterans whose loyalty is to him, not to the state apparatus that has allegedly been infiltrated by the faction trying to eliminate him. And the secrecy around his departure was so tight, even the Zimbabwean deputy ambassador to Uganda, who was at the airport to welcome him, Mrs. Libaziso Manyonga, representing Ambassador Winnipeg Moyo, confirmed his arrival only after the fact. The ambassador's office knew he was coming, but reportedly did not know exactly when, did not know which flight, did not know the manifest, because that information was kept from the standard diplomatic channels that would normally coordinate a vice presidential visit. Family, when the second most powerful person in Zimbabwe does not trust the state to know when his plane lands, we have crossed a line that has never been crossed before in Zimbabwe's modern political history. Now, let us talk about why Kampala specifically, because Chiwenga did not choose this trip randomly, and the timing 6 days before May 18th. The timing 8 days now that's 10, so 7 days before May 18th is not coincidental. Approximately 40,000 guests are expected at Museveni's inauguration, including 35 heads of state, 30 diplomats and delegates from several liberation movements, including the ANC, ZANU-PF, Frelimo, CCM of Tanzania, RPF of Rwanda, and CNDD of Burundi. 35 heads of state in one room in Kampala on May 12th, 6 days before Zimbabwe's most consequential parliamentary vote. This is not an inauguration trip. This is a diplomatic offensive. Every African head of state at that economy is a potential ally. Every liberation movement delegate is someone who needs to understand from Chiwenga directly, face to face, in the corridors of Kololo ceremonial grounds, what is really happening in Zimbabwe, what CAB 3 means, what the 2030 agenda represents, and who the credible alternative to it is. The inauguration ceremony will run under the theme Protecting the Gains, making a qualitative leap to higher middle-income status. ZANU-PF confirmed their delegation's attendance alongside other liberation movements. ZANU-PF confirmed their attendance, which means Chiwenga, representing Zimbabwe, is in that room as the official face of the ruling party, not Mnangagwa, who stayed home, not any 2030 faction loyalist. Chiwenga, shaking hands with 35 heads of state, representing Zimbabwe, building relationships, representing himself as a serious, credible, internationally engaged leader, weeks before a constitutional showdown that will determine whether he ever gets to lead his country. Zimbabwe. That is not just a trip, that is a campaign, and the private security around it signals that he knows exactly how high the stakes are. Now, family, let us address why the private security is not just politically significant, but personally urgent. The decision to bypass state security protocols follows specific intelligence that has been circulating in Chiwenga's camp. And the most alarming piece of that intelligence, the one that reportedly pushed him to make this unprecedented security decision, is the aircraft tampering allegation. Reports from within the Vice President's circle indicate that intelligence was received about a potential plot to mechanically compromise his official aircraft during international transit. not a ground threat, not an ambush. The aircraft itself, the plane he would be flying in over international airspace, where there are no witnesses and no accountability. Now, I want to be responsible here, family. This is unverified. This is intelligence from a faction that has every motivation to believe the West. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But here is what we do know. We know that a weapon planting plot was allegedly organized against Chiwenga, and 3 CIO officers are sitting in cells for refusing to execute it. We know that a Belarusian linked operative codenamed Bedrock was allegedly contracted according to leaked intelligence documents. We know that generals who stood with Chiwenga have died under circumstances that have never been fully explained. We know that his wife was removed from military intelligence. We know that his CIO director allies have been fired. Against that backdrop, when your vice president receives intelligence about aircraft tampering, you do not dismiss it as paranoia. You arrange your own security detail. You keep your flight manifest away from standard diplomatic channels. And you land in Kampala knowing that only people whose loyalty is personally verified know where you are and when you arrived. Babu. Here is the layer of this story that nobody is talking about. The profound irony of where Chiwenga has gone to conduct his diplomatic offensive. Museveni's upcoming swearing-in marks another milestone in one of Africa's longest-serving presidencies, having first taken office in January 1986 after his National Resistance Army seized Kampala. His 7th term extends his leadership to nearly 4 decades. Museveni, 7th term, 40 years in power, the man whose inauguration Chiwenga is attending, is himself the embodiment of exactly what CAB 3 is trying to create in Zimbabwe, a leader who found ways, constitutional and otherwise, to extend his stay beyond what was originally envisioned, who removed term limits, who has been in power since before most Zimbabweans were born. The NRM Secretary General confirmed that liberation movements from across Africa were invited, confirming that this victory is not only for NRM, but a victory for Africans. Liberation forces are joining in solidarity. Liberation solidarity, the same language used to justify CAB 3 in Zimbabwe, the same framework that ZANU-PF uses to explain why it should remain in power indefinitely. And here's Chiwenga, at the center of it all, at the inauguration of the continent's most prominent example of extended liberation movement rule, navigating that room, building those relationships, making his case to every leader present that Zimbabwe's constitutional integrity matters, even as he shakes hands with a man who has been in power for 40 years. The contradictions of African liberation politics all gathered in Kampala 6 days before May 18th. Now, let us talk about the ambassador detail. Because it is the most forensically precise evidence of how completely trust has broken down inside the Zimbabwe state machinery. Zimbabwe's deputy ambassador to Uganda, Miss Siliva Zisomanyonga, confirmed the vice president's itinerary, saying she was there to welcome the Honorable Vice President Dr. Constantino Chiwenga, who was coming to represent President Mnangagwa at the inauguration. Standard protocol: ambassador at the airport, welcome the VP, coordinate the visit, normal diplomatic procedure, but the specific flight manifest, the exact arrival time, the tail number of the aircraft, the passenger list kept from the standard channels, coordinated through Chiwenga's own private network rather than through the Foreign Affairs Ministry infrastructure that would normally handle a vice presidential visit. Why does that matter, Zimbabwe? Because the Foreign Affairs Ministry infrastructure feeds information upward through channels that the 2030 faction has influence over, through the same CIO structures whose director was fired, through the same state architecture that allegedly ordered 3 officers to plant weapons. Chiwenga knows how that architecture works. He helped build it. He knows exactly where the leaks are, and he has decided for this trip, at this moment, 8 days before May 18th, that the risk of that information flowing through compromised channels is unacceptable. That is not paranoia. That is institutional knowledge applied to genuine threat environment, and it tells you that the breakdown of trust between the vice president and the state security apparatus is now total. Not partial, not manageable, total. Family. Beyond the security story, let us talk about what Chiwenga is actually doing in those corridors in Kampala. Because the private security is the how, the regional diplomacy is the why. At that inauguration, surrounded by 35 African heads of state, Chiwenga is presenting himself, not hiding, not retreating, not showing fear despite the threats, showing up in a room full of the continent's most powerful leaders. As Zimbabwe's representative, as a man who bypassed the state security that was trying to neutralize him and got on a plane anyway, that image, that presence, is itself a message to every leader in that room, to every diplomat watching, to every regional body monitoring Zimbabwe's constitutional crisis. It says, I am here, I am safe, I am functioning, I am Zimbabwe's credible future. And whatever is being planned against me in Harare, it has not stopped me yet. The return from Kampala, expected before May 18th, will be watched as closely as any political event Zimbabwe has seen this year. Because what Chiwenga brings back, the relationships built, the commitments made, the regional understanding secured will determine how isolated or how supported he is when that parliamentary session opens. More Zimbabwe, 8 days to May 18th. A vice president who has not trust his own plan, who does not trust the CIO to protect him, who does not trust the standard diplomatic channels to keep his flight manifest private. He is in Kampala among 35 African heads of state, building whatever comes next. While his country counts down to the most consequential parliamentary vote in its modern history, this is what the complete breakdown of executive trust looks like in practice. Not in a press conference, not in a leaked audio, in the security arrangements of a man who has decided that the state he serves is trying to kill him, and who got on the plane anyway. 8 days. Chiwenga is in Kampala. May 18th is coming. And when he lands back in Harare, everything that he has been building for months is going to find its moment. Watch the return. Watch the first image. Watch who meets him at the airport. Watch whether he goes straight to State House or straight to the barracks. Because that first move after Kampala, that will tell us everything about what the next chapter of Zimbabwe's history looks like. Drop your thoughts, family. Does Chiwenga's private security in Uganda signal that he believes his life is genuinely in danger? And what do you think he is building in those Kampala corridors with 35 African heads of state? This is your boy Pano Pamzinda Wevan, fearless, always pro-democracy, forever. Peace.